the AC 24/7 Top Story Countdown. We'll guide you through the biggest news of the day. Our focus, advocating our rights, advocating equality, advocating health, and advocating Earth. Here's our pick for number 4.
We stand!
A show of support drawing tens of thousands in Washington, including lawmakers from both parties.
The survival of the state of Israel and her people unites us together, and it unites all Americans.
A rally to support Israel at a time of war.
We support Israel's fight to rid itself of the terror threat and restore safety and security to its people.
And to push for the release of hostages held by Hamas. The mother of hostage Hirsch Goldberg Poland pressing for action.
Why is the world accepting that 240 human beings from almost 30 countries have been stolen and buried alive?
Shachet Haran has 7 family members who've been kidnapped, including a 3-year-old niece.
I don't know if anyone is holding her hand, is keeping her warm. We don't know anything.
She came here from Israel, worried that the public's attention is focusing elsewhere.
People are talking about ceasefire, about a pause, but they're not talking about the hostages.
The rally also focused on countering antisemitism amid a spike in incidents at college campuses and elsewhere.
College and university presidents, if you remain weak, if you remain silent, you are complicit.
Political graffiti against Israel was found at the rally site this morning.
What scares me now is what I'm seeing, the anti-Semitism I'm seeing in the U.S. Seeing that out in the open is really terrifying. So it's also good to be here with people in solidarity.
Today, calls for action against hate.
Like our ancestors, who for 3,000 years looked hate straight in the eyes, we too will prevail.
Tight security in D.C. with roadblocks and checkpoints, with rallies to support Israel dueling with rallies to support Palestinians in a battle to win over public opinion.
I support everybody's right to protest. I just wish that people would come at it from a perspective of peace and coexistence.
TheAdvocateChannel.com looks at the world through the lens of equality and inclusion. Subscribe, like, and share now. AC 24/7's Top Story Countdown continues with our producer's pick for number 3.
The Israeli military operation going into Shifa Hospital began early Wednesday morning, and at this point, it has continued for the past 13 or so hours with no indication of how long it might take. The IDF has long accused Hamas of using Gaza's largest hospital, the Al-Shifa hospital complex, as a base for terror infrastructure, as a command and control center. A U.S. official coming out and saying they also have evidence and intelligence that that is what Hamas uses the hospital for. A senior Israeli military official who briefed reporters says they have evidence specifically showing Hamas uses Al-Shifa hospital, and they'll put that out not at this point, but that's expected sometime later on today. The official said they've been preparing for this specific operation for a couple of weeks, and it required specialized training for the difficulties and the complexities of operating inside a hospital. Israel went in with Arabic speakers to be able to communicate with the doctors, the officials, the patients, and the civilians. The hospital had been treating some 650 patients, and over the course of the past several days and weeks had been home to thousands who were seeking shelter from the fighting outside. This is also some video released from the IDF earlier today that shows them dropping off incubators, medical supplies, and baby food. We have geolocated to Al-Shifa Hospital, but because we're not on the ground in Gaza, we cannot independently verify what's happening there because of the difficulties of reporting in Gaza at this time. Meanwhile, there have been reports, and we have spoken with officials at the hospital, of ongoing fighting on the streets outside. The Israeli military says there have been no gunfights or exchanges of fire in the complex itself. They haven't been specific on where they're operating. Take a look at this map. This shows you how large the complex is. They say they're operating in a very specific part of the complex. That is where they're going after Hamas, but they won't be any more precise about where that is. According to Israeli Army radio, they have not found any evidence of hostages being held at Al-Shifa Hospital. That too, part of the ongoing effort of the Israeli military in Gaza.
Like the Advocate channel on Facebook for the best way to get updated stories that advocate for equality, justice, our rights, and more. AC 24/7 continues with today's top 2 pick.
People may not vote because they'll say, well, this happened under the Biden-Harris administration.
As Kerry Singleton looks ahead to the next presidential election, he's thinking back to the promises he heard President Biden and Vice President Harris deliver on a visit to Atlanta.
Pass the Freedom to Vote Act. Pass it now!
On that winter day, the president was closing in on his first year in office. Hopes were high for Singleton and other students on the grounds of Clark Atlanta University and Morehouse College. Since then, voting rights legislation stalled. The Supreme Court rejected a student loan forgiveness plan, and high prices, from food to housing, are fueling economic anxieties.
I do think that everyone is willing to hold the administration accountable for some of those promises that were made. And if they don't happen, I think it's going to be a scary election.
For all the warning signs facing the president a year before the election, the skepticism and apathy of young voters rank high.
Folks just feel poorer right now than they did 2 years ago. There's going to have to be a lot of conversations about how we feel like our issues are being heard.
Nabila Islam Parks is the youngest woman to win a seat in the Georgia Senate. In 2020, she went door to door in the Atlanta suburbs, building a coalition to help Biden turn the state blue. That coalition, she said, could fracture by the president's handling of the Israel-Hamas war.
I think that young voters recognize you can't bomb your way to peace and security, and so we do feel uncomfortable with that.
Rachel Carroll's first vote for president went to Biden. She said she doesn't regret it, given the alternative, but finds herself disappointed by some priorities of the White House.
If they can fund a war, they can find the money to pay off our student loans.
Young voters were a critical component of the president's victory, particularly here in Georgia, where Biden defeated Donald Trump by only 11,779 votes out of nearly 5 million cast. Exit polls in 2020 show that voters 18 to 29 made up 20% of the Georgia electorate, the only state of the top 6 battlegrounds where the percentage of young voters exceeded the national share of 17%. Biden won young Georgia voters by 13 points, according to exit polls. But now, a year before the 2024 election, surveys show a far closer race, with voters under the age of 30 here in Georgia split 46% for Trump and 44% for Biden, according to a New York Times Siena College poll.
The excitement is not as high as it was last time.
Alon Gibson and some of his classmates wish they had more inspirational and generational choices.
We have to pick between two different people who are very, very old and up in age.
We would like to see Biden pass the baton.
The vice president, whose college tour brought her back on campus this fall, resonates more.
I think she sparks that energy. She's like, when she came to Morehouse, it was fun. I felt her passion.
But with Biden at the top of the ticket, potentially facing a rematch of the 2020 race, voters say the burden rests on him to deliver on his promises and not take their support for granted.
Just as well as we hold Trump accountable, we have to hold Biden accountable.
Follow the Advocate channel on Twitter and Instagram to stay updated on stories that matter every day. We're now at our #1 story of the day. Take a look.
President Joe Biden touching down in San Francisco Tuesday ahead of his highly anticipated meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Earlier in the day, Biden was asked what he expects to gain from their meeting Wednesday.
To get back on a normal course of corresponding.
The two leaders are expected to talk about a variety of issues like climate change, drug trafficking, and the conflicts in Israel and Ukraine. The wars are one of the many reasons tensions between the two nations have been escalating. Last month, Xi and Russian President Vladimir Putin met, saying the, quote, common threats have brought the two nations together. That relationship could be seen as a threat as the U.S. has aligned with Ukraine.
Ties and communications between our two militaries are critical. The Chinese have basically severed those communication links. President Biden would like to reestablish them.
This will be the second time Biden has met with Xi in person since taking office, and it's been a tumultuous relationship throughout his presidency. This year, starting off with the so-called Chinese spy balloon flying over the U.S. China denies it was spying. Then in March, a House hearing to determine whether China was using the Chinese-owned TikTok to spy on Americans and gain their personal information.
Chinese Communist Party is able to use this as a tool to manipulate America as a whole.
TikTok CEO denying that. And in August, the Justice Department announcing 2 U.S. Navy sailors were arrested for espionage, accused of sending U.S. military information to China. Wednesday's meeting could be a first step to repair the tattered relationship. I'm Jen Sullivan reporting.
Thanks for watching the Advocate Channel's top stories. We're on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Follow, like, and share, or check out advocatechannel.com for even more stories that advocate for you.